So what better person to talk about what took place than someone who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. She's a great reporter. She is the White House correspondent from the Review-Journal. She is Debra Saunders, who joins us right now on the line. Debra, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Oh, I'm just really calm. It's covering the White House. It's like going to a spa.
I like that. I like that analogy. How crazy, Debra, has this weekend been? I mean, where do I even start? I guess I'll start with the breaking news. What is your reaction to Kayleigh McEnany testing positive for the coronavirus? What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of people were waiting to hear that because we know that Kayleigh McEnany had been very close to Hope Hicks, who came down with it last week. And there were a lot of people, and she's been getting tested every day since Thursday for that reason. And let's face it, somebody was a super spreader on Air Force One. And that's why there were so many people who came down with, who got sick, who tested positive, just because, people who were who were flying with the president on Air Force One, went to the rallies. So, but the fact that people aren't surprised doesn't mean that it's not a tough thing. She's a 32-year-old mother,
right,
with a little baby
who's recovered from cancer as well.
She has a gene which makes it. She had a double mastectomy to make sure that she wouldn't get sick. So anyway, this is it's just there are a lot of people who have had it, and this is okay. Mike Pence is leaving on a 4-day trip right now. And you have to sort of wonder if the White House is learning what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wonder, have they learned the lesson? Donald Trump goes around, he does rallies, he talks to people, he gets coronavirus. That's sort of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, we saw there were a number of people who complained about the president's ride with the Secret Service over the weekend. But I don't know, the fact that you have the vice president who's in line to be president if the worst happened, taking a 4-day trip, it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. I want to talk to you a little bit about that joyride that people are saying. So first of all, my understanding is that the press pool was not even told about this. Obviously, the president and his administration are taking a lot of flack. This is a vehicle where obviously everything is enclosed. The windows are closed up. A lot of people are saying that this puts some of those in that car, all those people in that car, at risk. What do you make of that and the fact that the press pool was not notified beforehand that that was going to happen?
So I know a lot of your listeners are thinking, oh, who cares about the White House press pool? We hate them all anyway. So if the White House does something without telling them, that's fine by me. I get that. But, the reason we have a pool is if anything were to happen to the president, we want to have witnesses there who see it happen. That's why they have a pool traveling with him all the time. And what they've been doing while the president's been at Walter Reed is if it's your day to pool, you show up in the morning and they drive you to Bethesda, you stay there in case there are any remarks that you're going to hear from the White House, and then they take you back. They would call a lid, and you think, okay, there's not going to be any news today. So the people who did all that go back, and then apparently the president just decided last minute he was going to do this. I mean, that's the only explanation, because otherwise they would have brought the pool back to Bethesda. So this is another sort of seat of your pants move by the president. And we saw him, I thought he did these great videos, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where he talks about what he has and what he's learned from it. But, I think that, and I'm not hyperventilating over the fact that he took a ride in a car with 2 Secret Service agents. I'm assuming that it looks like they had N95 masks on. I hope that there's little risk. Mark Meadows was on Fox News this morning, and he was asked about it, and he says, yeah, that's right, Secret Service agents. Who do you think took Trump to Walter Reed? Well, that's because it was an emergency, right? So this is just another example of it. I'm not somebody who's looking for reasons to say that Trump doesn't quite understand how to deal with the coronavirus, but they keep handing them out like candy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Debra Saunders. She's the White House correspondent for the Review-Journal. Let's talk a little bit, Debra, about these weekend briefings by the doctors. We're going to play some audio later in the show about this. But certainly, when we talk about what Mark Meadows said, I believe it was on Friday and Saturday about how serious the president's condition was, and then what we heard from the doctors, what do you make of that doctor basically withholding information about oxygen and then the next day clarifying and saying that he wanted to keep the president and the situation upbeat? This is strange. What did you make of that?
Well, the doctors aren't press secretaries, right? And they feel that they're serving their patient, not the public. And, of course, if you're a doctor, you're used to HIPAA and you're used to not talking about what's going on with your patients. I thought that was pretty clear from that press conference when reporters were asking, did he get oxygen? And he said, not today. We all knew what that meant, right?
Right, of course.
Yes. And so, I mean, I feel for these doctors. They didn't sign up for this. And obviously, Trump, Donald Trump, the president, really doesn't like being sick, and he really doesn't like people knowing he's sick. He was on Sean Hannity Thursday night, right?
Yep.
And it's pretty, he knew that he tested positive by then, and he wouldn't admit it. He said, I'll get the test later. Okay, he was going to get another test result, but he was sick. He had symptoms. He'd been around Hope Hicks, and she'd had symptoms. It was pretty clear. And he just doesn't. It's just not in his DNA to admit to something like that.
Do you think it's borderline criminal when reports are that the president knew that Hope Hicks had tested positive for the virus, yet the president of the United States still traveled to New Jersey and had a fundraiser event not wearing a mask? I mean, what do you make of that?
Now, they say it was outdoors, and I'll assume for the moment that's true, okay? There's been a recklessness in the president's behavior that is alarming to anyone who he just seems to think. I mean, I understand thinking I'm invincible, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
I think we've all had feelings like that in the course of this coronavirus, where we maybe did things that were not the smartest things to do. Mm-hmm. But he's the president of the United States, and it's not just him, right? This isn't just about him. It's about the country. It's about leadership. It's about having a chain of command and knowing who will be around. And this is a problem the president has, because he just sees the office as about him and not as an institution. And I think that's something that we're really seeing as we're watching what's going on right now.
No question. I have to ask you this, based on what you know, and nobody knows for sure, of course, and maybe not even the doctors at this moment, but do you believe the president will leave the hospital, Walter Reed, today? I mean, what do you know, and do you think – it's amazing to me because he's on some of these drugs where apparently if you start taking some of these drugs, it's a 5-day period where you can't really leave a hospital, but yet the doctors might let him leave. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, and do you think they actually will allow him to leave Walter Reed and go back to the White House today?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Now, my feeling is, and I'm not a doctor, but I would think, hey, I'd rather keep him there an extra couple days, right?
You would think.
Because that's right, because we know he's not a good patient. So wouldn't it be better to keep him for a couple days? And I think whether or not he leaves today is going to be incredibly instructive. What are we going to see? Because if he leaves today, I have to think that means that the council of the doctors has not been heeded, because I can't believe they're all thinking, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Go back to the White House.
Right. Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Where there are so many where people are testing positive newly every day, right?
Yeah, and then I'm hearing this this drug Remdesivir. That, and again, I'm not a doctor. I've just listened to those experts on television, both on Fox News and CNN, and they say this is a drug where you have to take it for around 5 days, and in that time frame, they could only administer it in a hospital, and you should not be, allowed to leave the hospital when you're on this drug. It's a 5-day thing. They started giving it to him. My understanding was on Friday. So how can you make the case of letting him leave the hospital on Monday? It sounds to me, and again, I'm not a doctor, but based on what the doctors are saying, a bit irresponsible if he leaves the hospital today.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And again, it's the sort of thing where he did that video where he said, "I get it now." Right?
Yeah.
And no, you don't.
Yeah, and then moments later he takes a joyride. Yeah. exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no question. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the debate, because this is a pretty, I'd imagine it's a pretty unique moment for yourself, Debra. You're very good at what you did and what you do. And as we know, you interviewed the president. You were the only one that got an exclusive with him when he was in Henderson. So I'm watching the debate, as I'm sure you were as well, Joe Biden and Donald Trump up there on the stage. And it was actually Joe Biden that referenced your interview when you asked the question to Trump about social distancing. And Joe Biden is using your interview in a debate on in a presidential debate. Just for starters, what's going through your mind when Joe Biden is doing that, talking about your interview? That's pretty amazing.
Well, okay, so I'll confess, my first thought was cool.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
I got mentioned in a presidential debate.
Right.
And he's done this before. I'm going to start charging royalties, okay? But he's done this before, but and he always mangles the details. But I think that his point is that you're not, my question was, aren't you concerned? And the answer was, no, I'm not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I understand why Joe Biden brought that up, because I think the point that he was trying to make is, well, you're saying, you're not worried because you're separated from the crowd and all this other stuff. Well, what about your supporters that are not separated? I think that's the point that Joe Biden was trying to make. I don't think he made it very eloquently, but just the fact that, I mean, I know me, I was a reporter for 10 years. If I did an interview and either the president or one of the presidential candidates brought up my interview, I would think I agree with you. I would think that's a very cool moment on the resume. I mean, that's pretty incredible, and credit to you for getting that out of the president.
Yeah, well, to me, it was the question of the moment, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, it was.
Well, aren't you concerned about getting it? It's an enclosed room, and he did get it later. Obviously, he didn't get it from the Henderson trip, and
right.
The truth is he has not been careful, and I think for a lot of people, again, and I'm guilty here. Over time, you feel like, okay, I haven't gotten it, and I'm probably if I continue doing what I'm doing, I won't get it. But I'm not talking to that many people a day, right?
Right.
I'm not giving rallies every week.
You're not.
And I'm not. So he's been reckless, and he seemed to feel that he was invincible. And when he did that video, he seemed to acknowledge that he understood that it was more serious than he thought. And yet, the fact that they have Mike Pence going off on the campaign trail, and I know that they'd planned this a long time ago. This trip, right? They're trying to have a big 30-day, all guns blazing, close to the election. But this isn't just an election. We have government here, and I can't believe Mike Pence is taking off on this trip today.
I got to say, you make such a great point with that, because I'm surprised as well. I think it's a bad decision, to put it bluntly. But I'll tell you something, Debra. We always appreciate it when you come on. You're so good at what you do. Thank you so much for your time. Please stay safe. And I know that your job isn't getting any easier over the course of the next few weeks, but we always appreciate it. We know how busy you are, Debra. Thank you so much for coming on. And if Joe Biden mentions you again, I'll be sure to let you know. Okay. Thanks for coming on, Debra. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Debra.